I never abandoned my kids. But for years, everyone was told the opposite. My brother, someone I trusted with my children during my darkest moments, used my pain as a weapon. 3 days after I drove my kids to him, he reported to the state that I had abandoned them, that I was unfit, that I didn't want them. He turned my love, my grief, and my desperation into a case file. He rewrote my story without me, and for years, my children grew up believing I was the monster. I had 3 babies, and I was fighting to survive. Financial struggles, legal battles, hospital nights, and the death of their father. But instead of support, the person I called family chose to betray me. I stayed silent to keep them together. I let the world believe the worst of me because I knew if I fought, CPS could take my kids and separate them. This is my story. The story of betrayal, grief, survival, and the long fight to reclaim my motherhood. And finally, the truth is breaking through the lies they built. I never abandoned my kids. But at 17, I was far from ready for the kind of life that would demand everything from me. I had my first child at 17, and 10 months later, I had twins. I wasn't planning it. I wasn't prepared for it. I was young, broke, and scared. But I loved those little humans more than anything in the world. They became my entire universe. Every thought and every heartbeat centered on keeping them safe and loved. Every sleepless night, every diaper, every meal I managed to put together was a fight, a small victory. It wasn't easy, but it was my life, and I embraced it fiercely. My family had never been a safe place. My mother struggled with addiction, and the weight of her battles often overshadowed my own. Nobody seemed to notice me spiraling. Nobody asked what I needed. I was already labeled the problem child before anyone tried to understand me. That label stuck, but I had no energy to argue. I had kids to raise. The father of my children was young and inexperienced like me. We were in love, but the world around us wasn't kind. We made mistakes, yes, but we also tried to make it work for the sake of our children. Our love wasn't perfect, but our commitment to them was unwavering. In 2014, we moved to Portland, hoping a new city could give us a fresh start. I imagined a life where my kids could grow up with stability, where I could figure out how to survive motherhood without constant fear of judgment or abandonment. But life had other plans. Not long after moving, my partner's health took a sharp turn. His kidneys began to fail. Dialysis 3 times a week became our new reality. Hospital visits and emergency room trips became routine. The tiny victories of keeping 3 kids alive on a daily basis became intertwined with the crushing exhaustion of medical bills, court dates, and unpaid work. By 2016, things escalated to a nightmare I wasn't prepared to face. My partner suffered a massive stroke. They put him in an induced coma and left him in the ICU for 6 months. 6 months of watching him lie unconscious, his body fighting to survive, while my children needed me awake, feeding them, changing them, keeping their routines intact. I slept in plastic chairs beside his hospital bed. I helped him relearn to walk, talk, and eat. Meanwhile, the world outside demanded more than I could give. Every day was survival, not living. Through it all, I kept my focus on my children. They were tiny, but they were my anchor.
Every smile, every laugh, every small accomplishment in their lives reminded me why I couldn't give up. I wasn't just raising children. I was protecting them from a world that already felt like it was against me. I had to be stronger than my fear, smarter than my exhaustion, and braver than I ever thought possible. When he finally passed in February 2018, my entire world collapsed. I had no plan, no family support, and 3 little humans depending entirely on me. The grief was suffocating, but there was no time to crumble. I couldn't cry for long. I couldn't break down completely. My children needed me alive, alert, and fighting. I was facing prison time for old charges, legal battles I had tried to put behind me. I had nowhere to turn. The state could have taken my kids, and I had no one to lean on. In my desperation, I made a decision that I thought would protect them. I asked my older brother Damien to watch them while I figured out how to survive legally and emotionally. He agreed, and I trusted him. Driving my kids from Portland to Los Angeles that day was surreal. I remember holding them close, whispering that mommy was fixing everything, that they were safe now. I tried to instill hope in their tiny hearts, even though inside I felt the cracks forming. I had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed, so unsure that I could protect the very people who were my entire world. I thought I had done the hardest part. I thought I had found a lifeline. Little did I know that very act of trust would become the beginning of a betrayal so deep it would haunt me for years.
I thought surviving motherhood alone was hard. Then life pushed me into a storm I couldn't have imagined. After the move to LA, everything seemed to speed up at a terrifying pace. My partner's health continued to decline. Dialysis, hospital visits, and medications were only the beginning. Then the stroke happened. They put him in an induced coma, and he stayed in the ICU for 6 months. 6 months of me holding tiny hands, guiding them through life while their father fought for his. 6 months of hospital chairs, sleepless nights, and the constant fear that he might not wake up. I was 22, raising 3 children, trying to hold together a family that felt like it was crumbling. Every phone call from the hospital was a dagger to my chest. Every doctor's update felt like a countdown. I remember sitting there in that sterile room, staring at his motionless body, feeling the crushing weight of the world pressing down on me. I had no time to grieve, no energy to cry, no space to even breathe. And the children, they needed me. They couldn't understand why Daddy couldn't wake up. They didn't understand the long nights, the stress, the fear that consumed every moment of my life. I had to be strong, even when every part of me was breaking. I had to be their mother, their protector, their safe place. There was no room for weakness. I learned to survive in the shadows of hospital corridors, whispering words of comfort while my own heart shattered. I fed them, changed them, played games, and smiled through exhaustion deep enough it felt endless. I held back tears when their little voices asked about Daddy, making promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I told them he was getting better, that everything would be all right. Deep down, I was terrified that nothing would ever be okay again. The days bled into nights, and nights back into days. Friends drifted away, overwhelmed by my constant chaos. Family barely noticed. I was alone, a mother on the front lines of a battle I never asked for, fighting for survival while the world assumed I could handle it because I chose this life. I haven't chosen this. I had just chosen my children, and that choice was all that mattered. Then came February 2018. the moment that shattered every remaining piece of my heart. My partner passed away. 6 years of love, struggle, and commitment ended in an instant. I was left with 3 small humans who looked up at me, their eyes wide with confusion and fear, and I realized that I had to become more than a mother. I had to be their entire world. At the same time, the legal system was closing in. Old charges I had assumed were behind me resurfaced, threatening to take my children away. I had nowhere to turn, no support system, no family willing to help, except for my older brother, Damien. I reached out to him, desperate, exhausted, and broken, and asked him if he could care for my children while I sorted out the chaos surrounding me. He said yes. Driving my kids from Portland to Los Angeles that day was surreal. I remember gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white, tears stinging my eyes. I tried to stay composed for them. I whispered promises. Mommy is fixing everything. You're gonna be okay. I won't let anything happen to you. I believed in him, my brother, the person I thought I could trust to keep my children safe. I didn't know it then, but in those 3 days after I left them in his care, my world would completely unravel. Damien reported me to the state, claiming I had abandoned my children. He told them I was on drugs. He used my grief and my desperation against me, weaponizing my situation to rewrite the story of my motherhood. I was forced into silence because any fight could have led to CPS taking the kids and separating them. I stayed quiet to keep them together, to protect them from the system he had manipulated. I let the world believe I was a neglectful mother. Every day, I swallowed the shame, the accusations, and the lies so my children wouldn't have to suffer. Those months were hell. I couldn't speak, couldn't advocate for myself. I watched helplessly as the person I trusted the most, the person who should have protected them, turned their world upside down. And all I could do was survive, breathe, and hope that somehow, some way, the truth would reach them. I thought I had done everything right. I asked for help, I trusted family, and I made the hardest choice of my life, handing my children over to my brother while I sorted out legal troubles and grief. I thought he would protect them. I thought he would love them like I did. But trust, I learned, can be the cruelest trap. 3 days after I left them in his care, Damien called. I could hear the calm, almost casual tone in his voice as he said the words that would shatter me. I reported to the state that you abandoned the kids and that you're on drugs. My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. I couldn't breathe. My own brother, the person I had relied on, had weaponized my lowest point against me. He took my grief, my desperation, my exhaustion, and turned it into a legal accusation. He painted me as the monster I had been fighting to avoid being, and he did it with precision. I couldn't fight him. If I did, CPS might have taken my children and possibly separated them. My heart broke with every passing moment of silence, but I stayed quiet because my priority was keeping them together. I had to swallow the anger, the pain, and the betrayal, all while knowing the world now believed I had failed as a mother. The adoption discussions began soon after that. Damien assured me that I could maintain a relationship with my kids. I asked one simple, desperate question. If you adopt them, will I still see them? He said yes. I wanted to believe him. I clung to that promise like a lifeline. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that it might not be true. That voice was right. Once the adoption was finalized, my worst fears came true. Damien cut me off completely. No calls, no updates, no pictures. Birthdays passed without a word.
Silence replaced the connection I had with my children. I was erased from their lives. Every effort I had made, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, it felt like it had been stolen from me. And then came the cruelest part. His wife, someone I barely knew, sent me a single message. A single accusation that was meant to destroy me. She claimed I had chosen men over my children, that I had allowed harm to reach them. Every word was a lie. I didn't respond. I couldn't. There was nothing I could say that would undo the narrative Damien had built, and every response felt like it might push my children further away. I had become invisible in the life I had fought so hard to create. I was a mother, yes, but one whose very motherhood was being denied by the person I trusted most. Every day was a struggle against the invisible force of his lies. I wanted to scream, to fight, to reclaim what was mine, but I couldn't risk it. Even as I sent small amounts of money for their needs, it felt transactional. My children weren't mentioned, only the fees and obligations that Damien wanted me to fulfill. Every request was a reminder that my love and care were not enough to break through the wall of control he had built. And yet, even in the silence, there were small signs of hope. My children, despite the lies, reached out secretly. They didn't believe the story he had written for them. Deep inside, they remembered their mother, the one who had held them through storms, who had loved them fiercely. That small, private connection was my lifeline. Those secret messages, those tiny glimpses of recognition, reminded me that no matter how much my brother tried to rewrite history, the truth couldn't be fully buried. My children still knew me in ways that no legal paperwork could erase. I had survived betrayal before, but nothing had felt like this. Nothing had cut this deeply. I was facing the ultimate betrayal, a family member using my children, the very beings I live for, as weapons against me. The anger, the grief, the helplessness, it all built into a weight that I carried with me everywhere I went. Every morning I woke up knowing I couldn't collapse. I had to survive. Not for me, but for my children. Even when the world assumed I was unfit, even when my own brother refused to recognize my love, I had to remain their mother in spirit, if not in presence. It was a cruel, twisting test of strength, one that I wasn't sure I could pass. But I had no choice. Survival wasn't optional. Reclaiming my voice wasn't optional. My love for them demanded that I keep going, even when every day felt like a war I couldn't win.
The years that followed were like living in a shadow. Every day was a battle to reconcile my love for my children with the crushing reality that my brother had cut me out of their lives. I had trusted him to protect them. I had believed his promises, and yet here I was, erased, silenced, and forced to watch my motherhood be rewritten without me. I tried to fill my days with work, routines, anything to keep my mind occupied, but the quiet moments were the worst. When I was alone, the memories hit me. The little smiles, the tiny hands in mine, the way they looked at me with complete trust. I could almost hear their laughter, but it was always out of reach, muffled by the lies that had been fed to them. Every interaction with my brother reminded me of the betrayal. At first, there were the cold legal notices, the adoption paperwork, the official letters. Then came the subtle ways he maintained control. He sent me occasional requests for money, $1,200 for football fees, small contributions here and there, but never a word about my children themselves. Not a single update, not a single acknowledgement of the love I had poured into them. When I asked to attend a game, he said I could, but only if I kept it secret. Don't let it be known. The kids aren't ready emotionally, he told me. The words cut deeper than I could ever describe. He wasn't protecting them. He was controlling me. My attempts to maintain a connection were treated like permission seeking for access to property, not human beings I had created and loved unconditionally. I started to feel the weight of isolation. My circle shrunk until it was almost nothing. Friends drifted away, unable to understand the unique pain of being erased from the lives of your own children. Family members who had once seemed like anchors either ignored the situation or accepted my brother's narrative without question. I was alone in a world that refused to see the truth. And yet, through it all, my children reached out in secret. Small messages, quiet words, gestures that reminded me they still remembered me. They didn't believe the lies. They knew deep down that I never abandoned them. Those moments were fragile lifelines, tiny threads of hope in a web of betrayal. Still, the emotional toll was immense. I questioned everything, my worth as a mother, my judgment, my strength. I felt powerless, silenced, and trapped in a nightmare that I had no choice but to endure. Every time I allowed myself to grieve openly, the fear of losing them permanently, even in spirit, made me clamp down. I swallowed my emotions, hid my tears, and forced a smile. I found solace where I could, in small victories, my children's secret messages, fleeting connections that reminded me my love hadn't been erased, my work, which became both distraction and lifeline, my resolve to survive, even when the world seemed to want me defeated. Every act of perseverance became a statement. I am still here. I am still their mother. The betrayal also forced me to confront the nature of trust. I realized that family isn't always protection. Sometimes it's the very thing that can hurt you the most. My brother's actions taught me a painful lesson. Love isn't always safe, and promises can be broken by those we least expect. The world I had trusted, my family, my support system, had failed me when I needed it most. But there was one thing I knew with certainty. My children were not mine to abandon, and no one could erase the bond we shared. Even in the years of silence, the love between a mother and her children endured, hidden from the world, but alive in our hearts. I held on to that truth as fiercely as I could, knowing it was the only thing that would sustain me through the darkness. And so I survived. I lived day by day, minute by minute, carrying both the grief and the hope. Every small act of care, every secret connection, every heartbeat of love was a rebellion against the narrative that had been imposed on me. Even though I couldn't see my children openly, even though the world had been told I was unworthy, I continued to exist as their mother in ways that mattered most, quietly, persistently, and without giving up. After years of silence, the small glimmers of hope for my children became my anchor. Even though Damien had built walls between us, their secret messages reminded me that the truth could never be fully buried. They remembered me. They remembered the mother who had loved them fiercely, fought through sleepless nights, and given everything she had for them. It started subtly. A text here, a note there, small things that weren't meant to be discovered by the adults controlling their world. I held on to each one like treasure, reading and rereading them in secret, letting the knowledge that they still believed in me sustain my spirit. It was the first taste of validation I had felt in years, proof that no matter how much my brother tried to erase me, my bond with my children remained unbroken. I knew I had to approach this carefully. After all, my brother had already proven how ruthless he could be. Any misstep could push my children further away, or worse, allow him to tighten his control. I spent countless nights planning, thinking, and imagining the right way to reconnect. I couldn't just storm back into their lives. I had to be patient, deliberate, and strategic, both for my children's sake and for my own sanity. The first real breakthrough came quietly. My children reached out directly, risking punishment, but seeking truth. They told me things they had never shared with anyone else, how they had questioned the stories they were told, how they remembered moments with me that contradicted everything Damien claimed. They didn't just see me as a mother, they remembered me as someone who had been there, present and loving, in ways that no one else could replicate. I cried the first time I heard it. Not from relief, not from joy, but from the release of years of grief and fear. My heart had carried the weight of betrayal and silence for so long that even a whisper of hope felt overwhelming. And yet it was real. It was tangible. My children had not forgotten me, and they were ready to reclaim the truth alongside me. Rebuilding our relationship was slow, painful, and delicate. Every conversation had to be carefully navigated. I had to avoid anger, even when my brother's lies were still trying to poison the connection. I had to stay calm, compassionate, and consistent. They needed to see me as a mother they could trust, not someone who had been absent, even though the world had been told otherwise. The process forced me to confront my own pain in ways I had avoided for years. I had to acknowledge the betrayal, the theft of my motherhood, and the deep scars left by Damien's manipulation. I couldn't hide from my anger or my grief, but I had to channel them constructively. Every conversation with my children became a step toward healing, not just for them, but for me. There were moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if the years of distance had caused irreversible damage. But each time I felt that fear creeping in, my children reminded me why I was doing this. Their willingness to see past the lies, to believe in my love, was the most powerful force I had ever encountered. It was the proof that no matter how much manipulation could erase, a bond built on love and sacrifice. Through this journey, I also had to confront Damien, not in anger, but in assertion. I had to establish boundaries, making it clear that my children's connection to me was not negotiable. I couldn't erase the past, but I could protect the future. Every step I took was a reclamation of my voice, my role, and my identity as their mother. Now, as I reflect on everything that happened, I realize that the truth has a way of breaking through even the most carefully constructed lies. My children are beginning to understand what really happened, and they are reclaiming their own narratives alongside me. We are rewriting our story together, grounded in the love that no one, no legal system, no betrayal, no lie can ever take away. The journey is far from over. Healing is not linear, and the scars remain. But I have learned that love is stronger than deception. Patience can outlast control, and the bond between a mother and her children is unbreakable when nurtured, even in secret. And so I continue, step by step, message by message, moment by moment. I am reclaiming my motherhood. I am reclaiming my voice. I am reclaiming the life that Damien tried to steal. And most importantly, I am finally able to stand in the truth. I never abandoned my children. I fought for them, loved them, and never stopped being their mother, even when the world said otherwise. Rebuilding our lives after betrayal wasn't easy, but it became my mission. Every step forward with my children was hard-won, a small victory against years of lies and silence. It wasn't just about reconnecting. It was about reclaiming the years stolen from us and creating a future that felt safe, authentic, and filled with love. I started with honesty. I told my children everything I could, my struggles, my grief, the pain of losing their father, and the betrayal I had suffered at the hands of someone they trusted. I didn't sugarcoat anything, but I also didn't want to overwhelm them. The key was balance, truth without fear, love without judgment, and patience without pressure. They needed to see that I was still their mother, even if the world had told them otherwise. It was emotional. Tears were inevitable for all of us. My children had grown up with a version of reality that painted me as absent, uncaring, and broken. I had to help them separate the lies from the truth, piece by piece, while also acknowledging their feelings. They were hurt, confused, and angry, and that anger was valid. But slowly, over conversations, over shared experiences, over small moments of laughter, the bond began to heal. We started building routines. Simple things, regular phone calls, video chats, shared meals when possible. We created memories intentionally, filling in the gaps that Damien had left. Even though time couldn't be reclaimed, we could make new moments that mattered, moments that affirmed the love that had never disappeared. I also focused on my own healing. The years of betrayal, grief, and silence had left scars, and I realized I couldn't be fully present for my children unless I worked through my own trauma. Therapy became a lifeline, helping me process anger, guilt, and fear. It helped me understand that their love for me wasn't dependent on the past being erased, but on the truth being present now. I began to reclaim my identity beyond the mother who was taken from her kids. I was Viola, survivor, fighter, and protector of the family I was rebuilding. Reconnecting with my children also meant redefining boundaries. Damien was still part of their lives, whether I liked it or not, but I had to establish limits to protect our relationship. I couldn't allow his control to continue dictating how or when we connected. I communicated openly with my children about these boundaries, explaining that my goal was to prioritize our relationship and their well-being. It wasn't about punishment, it was about safety, trust, and love. One of the most powerful moments came when my children started openly advocating for the truth themselves. They began questioning the narrative Damien had fed them and standing up for our bond. Hearing them use their voices, expressing their belief in me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It confirmed what I had always known. Love and truth can survive even the most calculated lies. Slowly, the emotional distance began to shrink. The phone calls became longer, the conversations more open. We laughed about memories that were never meant to fade. We shared stories of pain and resilience, and in doing so, we healed together. Each day felt like a small victory, a quiet reclaiming of the years stolen from us. I also realized something crucial. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape the future. Damien's betrayal didn't define me. It simply became part of the story we would overcome. Our family was no longer about the lies and manipulation. It was about truth, love, and resilience. I had fought for my children's hearts, and now, step by step, I was helping them fight for the truth too. This journey has been painful, messy, and full of setbacks, but it has also been transformative. I've learned that motherhood isn't measured by proximity, but by love, persistence, and the courage to reclaim what is yours. Even after the worst betrayal,
Even after years of silence, the bond between a mother and her children can endure and even grow stronger. Today, I am no longer living in fear of the past. I carry it with me as a lesson, a reminder of resilience, and a proof of love's endurance. I am rebuilding our family on a foundation of honesty, communication, and unwavering love. And most importantly, I am reclaiming my voice, my role, and my identity as a mother who never stopped fighting for her children, no matter what the world believed.
As time passed, the chaos and betrayal that had once defined my life began to feel more like chapters of a book I was finally learning to close. Rebuilding a relationship with my children was no longer just about reconnecting. It became about growing together, healing together, and reclaiming the sense of family that had been stolen from us. The first step was acceptance. I had to accept that the past couldn't be rewritten. Damien had done what he did, and no amount of anger or regret could change that. But what I could do was focus on the present and future, on the moments where I could truly be their mother, their guide, and their safe space. I had to let go of the guilt I carried for the years I wasn't allowed to be with them openly. The truth was, I had never abandoned them, and holding on to that fact gave me strength. We began creating traditions, small but meaningful routines that became ours. Saturday video calls turned into weekly movie nights over Zoom when distance prevented visits. Birthdays were celebrated with handmade cards and shared stories. Every phone call and every shared laugh was a step toward undoing the silent years of separation. Even the smallest moments were profound because they were built on honesty and love. Therapy continued to be a cornerstone of our healing. I encouraged my children to seek counselors who could help them process the lies they'd grown up with and the confusion surrounding our separation. Together, we worked through feelings of betrayal, sadness, and anger. I shared my experiences too, not to burden them, but to show that they were not alone in their emotions, and that resilience often comes from facing pain head on. I also had to rebuild trust, not just with my children, but with myself. For so long, I had questioned my decisions, my instincts, and my worth as a mother. The constant messaging that I was unworthy had left deep scars. But slowly, I began to trust my voice again. I learned to advocate for myself and my children, to assert our rights to love, connection, and respect, and to reject the false narratives imposed upon us. Reconnecting fully meant allowing the past to be acknowledged without letting it define the present. We talked openly about Damien's deception, the adoption, and the silence that followed. My children needed to understand the truth, but also that it was not their fault. They needed reassurance that my love had never wavered, even when circumstances had kept us apart. Each conversation was both a healing and a reclamation, reinforcing that our bond could never be erased. Empowerment became another crucial piece of the puzzle. I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and now I wanted my children to see strength in honesty, courage in vulnerability, and love in resilience. I taught them that family is not defined solely by biology or proximity, but by loyalty, respect, and the willingness to fight for each other. We were building our version of family, strong, intentional, and unbreakable. There were setbacks, of course. Old feelings of fear and anger occasionally resurfaced, and sometimes the weight of past trauma felt unbearable. But we faced each challenge together. I reminded myself constantly that healing is not linear, and each difficult moment was an opportunity to grow stronger, both individually and as a family unit. Looking back now,
I realized that the experiences I endured, painful as they were, taught me resilience, empathy, and the value of truth. I emerged from the darkest chapters of my life, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a mother and a woman reclaiming her power. The bond with my children is stronger than ever, forged through trials, honesty, and love that no one can take away. And while the scars of betrayal will never fully disappear, they serve as reminders of how far we've come. We have taken the lies, the silence, and the absence and transformed them into proof of endurance and connection. Every hug, every word of encouragement, and every moment spent together now is a victory. We have reclaimed our story, and in doing so, created a foundation of love, trust, and understanding that will last a lifetime. The truth finally lives in our hearts and our memories, not in the distorted versions others tried to force upon us. I am no longer defined by the lies or the years of separation. I am Viola, the mother who never gave up, the woman who faced betrayal with courage, and the parent who rebuilt her family on the unshakable truth of love. And now, as I look at my children, I see not just the stolen years, but the new ones we are creating together. They are thriving, they are loved, and they know that their mother never stopped fighting for them. Our story, once fractured and silenced, has finally been reclaimed, and we are stronger for it.